I want to begin today with a few observations on China, because the media's focus on the current pandemic risks missing the bigger picture of the challenge that's presented by the Chinese Communist Party. First, basic facts. China's been ruled by a brutal authoritarian regime, a communist regime, since 1949. For several decades, we thought the regime would become more like us through trade, scientific exchanges, diplomatic outreach, letting them in the WTO as a developing nation. That didn't happen. We greatly underestimated the degree to which Beijing is ideologically and politically hostile to free nations. The whole world is waking up to that fact. Pew reported, I think it was this past week, that 66% of Americans have an unfavorable view of China. That is a direct result of the Chinese Communist Party's choices, which are influenced by the nature of the regime. And the nature of that regime is not new. Second point, on the bigger picture. The Chinese Communist Party's response to the COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan have accelerated our more realistic understanding of Communist China. The party chose to destroy live virus samples instead of sharing them or asking us to help secure them. The People's Liberation Army has claimed more features in the South China Sea's international waters, sank a Vietnamese fishing boat, threatened a Malaysian energy prospector, and declared a unilateral fishing ban. The United States condemns these unlawful acts. The Chinese Communist Party chose to threaten Australia with economic retribution for a simple act of asking for an independent inquiry into the origins of the virus. It's not right. We stand with Australia and the more than 120 nations now who have taken up the American call for an inquiry to the origins of the virus so we can understand what went wrong and save lives now and in the future. The Chinese Communist Party also chose to pressure the World Health Organization's Director General into excluding Taiwan from this week's World Health Assembly in Geneva. I understand that Dr. Tedros' unusually close ties to Beijing started long before this current pandemic, and that's deeply troubling. President Xi claimed this week that China's acted with openness, transparency, and responsibility. I wish it were so. It's been 142 days since doctors at Wuhan Central Hospital first started sharing information about a SARS-like virus. And yet, today, as we all sit here this morning, Beijing continues to deny investigators access to relevant facilities, to withhold live virus samples, to censor discussion of the pandemic within China, and much, much more. If the Chinese Communist Party wants to demonstrate real openness, real transparency, it could easily hold press conference like this very press conference and allow reporters to ask him anything that they would like. Third, China's contributions to fighting the pandemic are paltry compared to the costs that they have imposed on the world. This plague has cost roughly 90,000 American lives. More than 36 million Americans have lost their jobs since March. Globally, 300,000 lives could be as much as $9 trillion, according to our estimates. Cost imposition on the world by the Chinese Communist Party's failures. The United States has responded with about $10 billion to benefit the international response, everything from vaccine research to funding for preparedness efforts and humanitarian aid. That's compared to a promise of $2 billion from the Chinese. I look forward to seeing them fulfill that $2 billion commitment. Private American businesses too, nonprofits, charities, citizens have provided an additional $4.3 million from American donations to assist the world. There is no country that remotely rivals what the United States has done to help combat this terrible virus. And today I'm pleased to announce another $162 million in foreign assistance, bringing our total commitments dispersed to more than $1 billion since the outbreak began. And that's just what the State Department and USAID have done. In addition to that funding today, the State Department and USAID and the Inter-American Foundation are providing more than $200 million in assistance for the Venezuelans in need as well. This is what we do all around the world. We will help the world recover from this pandemic. Turning for a moment to Taiwan, I want to say congratulations to President Tsai on her inauguration. The democratic process in Taiwan has matured into a model for the world. Despite great pressure from outside, Taiwan has demonstrated the wisdom of giving a people a voice and a choice. Our decision on whether or not to identify Hong Kong as having a high degree of autonomy from China is still pending. We're closely watching what's going on there. This week, pro-democracy legislators were manhandled while trying to stop a procedural irregularity by pro-Beijing legislators. leading Hong Kong activists like Martin Lee and Jimmy Lai were hauled into court. Actions like these make it more difficult to assess that Hong Kong remains highly autonomous from mainland China.
On Taiwan, you mentioned that the democratically elected Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen a few hours ago inaugurated to continue her second term. We saw a video message from Deputy National Security Advisor Pottinger in Mandarin Chinese. And we saw the video message from Assistant Secretary Stilwell and your statement to congratulate Taiwan. My question for you is, how does the United States envision its relationship with Taiwan and Taiwan's global participation after WHO in the coming years? Separately, if I may, President Trump mentioned last week that the U.S. may cut off all relationship with China. Would you like to weigh in your thoughts? Should the United States ponder an official relationship with Taiwan based on shared values of democracy, religious freedom, and human rights? Thank you.
So we congratulated the winner of the election there. We were happy to see that. My congratulations were in English, not Mandarin. It was the best that I could do. But we understand that the work that we have done there, and it comports with the history of the agreements between the United States and China, is the right solution to maximize the stability there in the Straits. You know, the president talked about how we're going to respond, how he's beginning to think about responding to the calamity that has befallen the world as a result of the actions of the Chinese Communist Party. I don't want to get ahead of him in terms of talking about how the administration will respond to that, but you can already begin to see the outlines of it. I talked about this with our 5G national security trifecta. You can already see how we're beginning to work to make sure we get America first, that we get this foreign policy right, and that we respond to these risks that the Chinese Communist Party presents to the United States in an appropriate way. You saw yesterday, I think it was, or maybe it was the day before, the Department of Defense make announcements about work on rare earth minerals, so that, again, we wouldn't be dependent on a nation that has demonstrated its unreliability, its willingness to steal our intellectual property, all the things that, frankly, for decades, and this isn't remotely partisan, Democrat presidents, Republican presidents, all just turned the other way because of 1.5 billion people and the opportunity for enormous markets and this hope that engagement would lead to a change in the behavior of the Chinese Communist Party. It didn't happen. And President Trump has been incredibly serious about making sure that we do the right things for the American people. I know he'll continue to do it. We continue to work on this to develop an appropriate way to think about how we can get the Chinese Communist Party and China to behave in a way that's consistent with how we ask every nation to behave.